The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. Weekend editions here at Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, and Elijah Herbel. As we get you going this Saturday morning, we'll get starting 5. Our roll call and shout-outs going on here in a little bit. And morning, fellas. How we doing?
Hey, good to see you. Good to see you. That was great timing, too, by the way. On the intro, my name's on there. How old is that intro, by the way? We've had that thing for...
Since 2009? No, 2011. 2011.
I'm surprised the tape isn't all warped. You know?
It's I know it's from way pre-me, but as soon as this Saturday show became an online streaming only show, it became a case of me looking at that intro and going, I guess it works. Like...
Yeah, exactly. But as soon as my name came on, you put me on the screen. That was pretty incredible. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of the show.
As soon as it was Mark Kraynak, up pops Mark Kraynak.
Then, yeah, it like summoned me.
I think we should do that more. Maybe that's how we should start the show every single week, where you and Schmidt are both sitting in the green room and it's just me, and then as soon as your names are called, we add you to the stream. Could be kind of cool. Could be a lot of work for very little payoff, but could be cool.
Right. It would be amusing for all of like 4 seconds, so it's probably worth it. Eric, look at Eric, by the way.
NASCAR Eric, brother.
Chiming in already. He's like, look, they beat their guest today. Oh, meaning we're not.
We'll take it.
That hasn't happened
So
yet,
when
right? Brandon hasn't beat us.
Brandon pretty much beat us last week. Yeah.
Beat all of us?
Yeah. We had some issues with the computer last week, and I'm sure the people at home don't want to hear anything else about this. Oh, wow.
Let me introduce the new member.
What? Hold on. Chris has a new dog. If people
this was my birthday gift, apparently.
When was your birthday? I didn't even know it was your birthday.
Two Saturdays ago, the 17th. Ouch, you little shit.
Oh my God. Listen to the language. Yeah. Chris turned 60 and he just starts getting pissed off at anything and swearing like a sailor.
This is Sterling.
Just biting on you.
All right, Hurrdat chimes in on the stream. Odds on why the boys are late today. Elijah overslept, -150. Computer issues, -225. Other, +110. It's fair.
We did the semifinal last night for the Class A girls state title game. Mark Kraynak's Bellevue West T-Birds back in the championship game against Lincoln Southwest. And
let's go.
Our dear friend, Coach Tim Berta, they just played a heck of a game. And not enough as Kraynak's T-Birds back in the title game for the first time since 2014, man.
We do things differently there. You know what I'm saying? For Bellevue West, it's just like there's a legacy. You know what you're signing up for. And, proud of the – didn't even know they were in it, to be honest. I haven't – I have no idea what's going on in state high school basketball right now.
You have travel volleyball, you have baseball, you're doing all that stuff. So, no, it's been a busy spring, but it's been a quiet spring aside from chasing 3, right? That's the look-see into Nebraska football with the documentary feature that they do. The word today has been playoff expansion. That's dominated the week of college football. Not only playoff expansion, but automatic qualifiers. And I don't really have an issue with it with the SEC and the Big Ten. If you're the Big 12 and the ACC, sure, you can be ticked off a little bit. But, hey, the folks that drive the bus and the money, Big Ten and SEC, either join them or deal with the leftovers. That's some people's take. Husker basketball just reverting back to some of their bad habits against Ohio State. They had a shot to kind of seal the deal for an NCAA tournament berth, we believe. And also, when we talk conference expansion, a couple of different, prominent media members nationally came out this week with Notre Dame to the Big Ten. And the funny name we heard was A&M to the Big Ten with Nebraska. Kraynak, I want to get your thought on it. Elijah and I beat it up. We talked to some other folks about it, and it sounds crazy because of what you make in the SEC, but it's comparable to what you'd get in the Big Ten. I don't know what it's going to cost you to pay that buyout in the SEC, but they hate Texas. We know that's true.
Yeah,
A&M hates Texas.
Well, I think the question we have to ask ourselves here, whenever you look at this Texas A&M story, really everything this week, like, what did you just lay out? You laid out 3 stories that I guess are there, but they aren't really all that compelling. Like Husker basketball's got a couple of games left, and as long as they don't screw it up, you're in. Playoff expansion, well, it just expanded. We haven't even seen a 12-team playoff. Conference expansion with A&M and Notre Dame. The question to me right now with this story is there smoke to this? Is there legs to this? Or is it just that point in the offseason now where the talking heads of college football, us included, just need to find something to talk about? Like, how real is this story? Or is it just whenever you reach early March, I guess late February into early March, do you just need something to talk about?
Yeah, you do wonder a little about that. But if you're the Big 12, if you're the AC, I mean, look, everybody knows. Right? The writing's on the wall. Everybody knows what's happening.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah, it's just everybody knows that, damn it, it's really going to be those two in the driver's seats. Like, yeah, and they kind of already are. So if you want to be like part of that, then do it. We can relate with A&M. Nebraska can relate with A&M. Texas just operates differently. They know they're the most valuable number 1 brand in college sports, and they act like it. You kind of can't blame them in some ways. But if you're A&M, making a little skip over to the Big Ten wouldn't be. It's not like what a good position they can be in, where they can kind of choose potentially between those two. And I wonder if there would even be more of that. I wonder if there would even be more of that cross pollination SEC Big Ten stuff over time.
I think you're going to have this gentleman's agreement between the SEC and the Big Ten where you're not going to raid each other's conference for one supreme being. You can both work together. You've got the TV expertise with Petiti. You've got the regional worship with the SEC. You got the national brand of the Big Ten. You two can kind of rule the college football world together and pick and choose how it wants to go. You got the AFC, you got the NFC. Yeah. And from a TV standpoint, you bet your money that Petiti's going to set up 4 divisions in the Big Ten. The SEC will follow suit. It's going to jump to 20 or 24. So you have 4 divisions, and then you're going to have your conference semifinal, and then you're going to have your conference championship game. And oh, by the way, you'll still get 4 teams. You'll still make the playoffs. So away you go. And how can you just dictate and dominate most money, most eyeballs, and how this thing shakes out? Well, we got to figure out who's going to be calling the shots, because the NCAA and their committee on infractions said uncle yesterday when it came to dealing with NIL and third base problems and issues they've had with some of the companies that are in charge of NIL in their relationship during recruiting and getting athletes to campus. So, I mean, it's about to settle and be a thing. They're just working a few kinks out. The big thing for Nebraska, though, is to be relevant. I mean, the fire code is about to be challenged here with X number of teams that are in the party. Make sure you're still in that room, and they are, because they're in the Big Ten. But now, from a competition standpoint, step your game up.
Yeah, well, it seems like they're working on that.
Yeah,
it seems like Nebraska's made some of the right moves to do that, and we'll see if it actually equates. But you got to be somewhat bullish on what Rule and company have cooking right now. I know we've been saying that, Chris. I'm very mindful that we have been saying essentially that same thing for each new coach that walks in the door and fixes the wrongs of the prior administration.
That's an us problem. We've been doing this long enough that we have seen from Solich to Rule.
Yeah, we kind of have to. I think we have to start going with our instinct a little more. You know, I think we got to start going with like when Riley was named. That didn't feel good, right? On day one.
Just, what the hell's this? Yeah.
And then we had to talk ourselves into it. It's like, you know what? This is probably going to work. He's a nice guy. Nebraska's nice. He's nice. Nebraska's nice. Yeah. They were 9-4. Back in,
is there not the moment? I remember exactly where I was when the Mike Riley hire was announced. I know exactly where I was. It's one of those moments. People say that about like tragic world events. I remember where I was when Mike Riley got fired. I was on my way back to Lincoln Southeast.
Got fired or hired?
Sorry, hired. He was back. I was on my way back from the dentist to Lincoln Southeast in the middle of the day, and I stopped and it was like, you know what? If I went to the dentist, I'm going to get my money's worth out of it. And I stopped for some Chinese food on the way back to Southeast, and I checked my phone. I get to the Chinese place, and bang, Mike Riley got hired. I say, who the hell is this guy? Yeah.
That was a late Sunday. What the hell?
Yeah.
I was at a conference in Santa Clara, California. And I was just like looking around, just like, does anybody else in here care about what is happening here? And no one did.
Were you breathing in a bag?
My one other boy from Omaha there, I was like, dude, look at this. What? He's like, who's that? I'm like, exactly. Oregon State. Brandon, do you know where you were? Brandon Vogel joins us, by the way.
counterread.com.
Which we sometimes forget that this is an audio only experience as well, and we just tend to the video too often. But Brandon has popped onto the screen, joined the podcast. Do you remember where you were, Brandon, when Mike Riley was when you found out Mike Riley was being hired?
Yeah, I believe I was just at home. I'm trying to remember. I don't think we had an issue going to print that Sunday, but you know, it became, I was just probably hanging out in my office like this. The news came, and I remember talking with our staff and everybody being kind of like, huh, okay. Well, I guess we'll get started on this. And so we did.
Yeah.
Vogues, I remember your preview on year one of Riley. We all motored to Chicago for Big Ten Media Days. And I think it was at the McCormick. Radio Row was set up really in a pretty nice spot, as you had to physically walk into a lower level of the hotel. So that was cool. And Westerkamp and Tommy Armstrong were there as representatives, and Grandpa came by with his Werthers and was nice to sit down with, and just a good dude. Like, you can blast the hire, you can blast the record, but he wasn't a pain in the ass at all to be around or cover, which who cares? I mean, that's our job. That being said, he I don't know, man. It was just different, and there was hope because and you dove deep into it, man. With the anatomy of an upset. I remember your feature, your story, Brandon Vogel, counterread.com, on how Riley had these just giant great whale wins in his career. And, oh, by the way, put together some pretty impressive and improbable runs. Remember talking to John Robinson with the hire. Remember talking to Keyshawn Sr. I mean, we reached out to a lot of folks between print and radio, and it was, all right, this could work. And he even delivered a couple of wow wins while in Lincoln. This isn't the Mike Riley hour, but, you know, that has spawned the where were you when. And it's fun and fascinating to kind of revisit that during the offseason. But your story speaks pretty high volumes of him getting his team ready for that big moment.
Yeah, he did that a couple of times. That story specifically, I'm forgetting what year it was now, but focused on the upset of USC. And, you know, there was a lot of kind of source data out there about that game. And it was a pretty interesting look at it. You know, I remember thinking even then, so like the hire of Riley, you kind of made sense on paper. You dug into it. You're like, well, you know, pretty much a career 500 coach, but that seems pretty good for Oregon State, right? Good enough that he got hired there a second time. And you're like, if you just, if you take Oregon State's natural state, get it to 500, well, if Nebraska starts out higher than that, that was the basic play on paper, I guess. That said, I think looking back at that story now, at Nebraska, the expectation is so much higher to start that, like, you're expected to knock off to USC. You're expected to be, USC. So it's just it's a very different mindset. Mike Riley was kind of the the ultimate football guy. Like, it was just kind of about football for him, which is good work if you can get it. I think, even by 2015, 16, that range, we were seeing the CEO coach kind of come more into focus. And, I was looking back at those years for something else that I wrote this week. And really the Riley era was, you had 2015, which, ended up going 5-7, 6-7 after backdooring into a bowl game. That wasn't quite as bad as it looked. The next season wasn't quite as good as it looked. In fact, I'll never forget, like, their point totals, offense and defense, were basically the same in 2015 and 2016. It's like the ultimate example of schedule and injury luck, turnovers luck. And then 2017, this is the thing that jumped out to me. It's like they lost a ton off of that 2016 team. I was going through and looking at it. They were, really –
They were bad.
A downturn wasn't unexpected. That said, 4-8, and I think some of that got overshadowed by the Tanner Lee year of, like, well, maybe this is their kind of guy, and but they were pretty inexperienced.
You want to talk about just an absolute hype show at quarterback? I mean, my God, remember that? And guilty, raising both hands.
You know what I remember? I remember
Tanner's going to come in and be an NFL gunslinger, Vogues, and Elijah and Mark. And
a lot of arm talent.
Yeah.
I remember
throwing pick sixes.
A 99-yard pick six against Northern Illinois my freshman year of college. That one was the moment where I went, oh, this is not good.
2 pick sixes in that game.
Yeah, I know.
The 99-yarder, I think, on the opening drive is the one that stands out in my memory as being the real gut punch.
But the way the ball comes out of his hand, fellas, he went to a Manning Academy, and the Mannings liked him because the ball came out of his hand.
Tulane got a diamond.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what he did do for Nebraska is he kept their draft streak alive for 1 year. He was the only guy drafted in 2018 from that 2017 team.
Is there a chance, given that Nebraska doesn't have anybody at the combine, is there a chance that Nebraska gets no one drafted this year too? Like, could that happen?
I think that's
drafted.
What's that, Chris?
I don't think they get anybody drafted.
Oh, wow. Haven't really talked about that, have we? That'd be 2 years in a row, right? Because last year there was nobody.
The streak was snapped, yeah.
Yeah.
So 2 years in a row, nobody drafted.
Which, kind of adds up. I mentioned looking back at the Riley era. I was really looking back at since 2009 at Nebraska. I wrote a newsletter yesterday that you can still find at counterread.com, of course, about who's Nebraska's guy this year, and I don't know the answer. I just kind of opened it up for discussion, but in doing so, I went back and started in 2009 because it was easy. Because it was like Sue. It was like, there you go. That's your dude who's just gonna be better than almost anybody else on the field, and he was pretty much better than everybody. And then you go down to Prince, Amukamara maybe the next year, and you got Randy Gregory and Amir Abdullah and Rex Burkhead in there. You get down to 2018-19. In 2017, I selected Chris Jones. That's kind of what made me. Chris Jones was a really good player, had a pretty nice run in the NFL, but that's not. You're not talking about Ndamukong Suh at that point. And Nebraska, had multiple options in those 9, 10, 11, 12 years. In fact, that was the other big takeaway. I was like, Nebraska really, I mean, they played in 3 conference championship games. You just couldn't get it done. Those teams were talented.
Well, and I'll say this, like this somehow got into the Riley, the Mike Riley discussion higher, but think about the last 2 decades of changes and why they're made. And you had 2 or 3 guys every year, right? They get developed into, or they end up being either on the lines of scrimmage or a linebacker. Somebody's getting drafted. Someone's going to the league. And during the Osborne era, you just stockpiled. You had a first, second, or third round guy. You had his backup 2 years later go, specifically the run of defensive end / outside linebackers. You were gold for a first round pick for 2 decades. And you had, at least a third round pick, i.e. a Will Shields, Hall of Famer, go on the offensive line. You fast forward to Callahan. He was brought in to beef up recruiting. Well, he did. I mean, he brought in some really high-level dudes. Bo got a hold of them, developed them, and they were incredible. Between Prince, right? Bill Bush brought in Prince. Sue was John Blake. And then I believe it was Carl who got Levante, right? And then you look at even the aftermath of that run where you go get Amir, you go get Randy Gregory, you go get Vincent Valentine, you go get Malik Collins. I mean, those are all second through third round guys. Yeah. And even through the draft streak, it was Kavanaugh that found 3 of Nebraska's offensive lineman guys that ended up getting drafted, and some of them are still in the league. Who's the South Dakota kid? Forgive me. Farniak, and then Hymas was a 5th-round guy for San Diego. But then it just falls off the table.
Yeah, it does. Minus Taylor Britt and Juergens in the second round.
And Cam was awesome. Yeah, you're a good call.
And I mean, he was committed to Riley for a long time. Taylor Britt was like the biggest, I think, recruiting win in terms of discovering a guy and developing him of the Frost era. For sure. And I mean, some of those guys are still around, so the book's not entirely written on that. But yeah, I mean, around 2015, I selected Malik Collins as Nebraska's guy. The next year, you got Nathan Gary, good player, but is he the guy who's like keeping opposing Big Ten coaches up at night? Probably not. And then it sort of tails off from there.
Well, a question I think you have to ask yourself in terms of Matt Rule's rebuild of Nebraska is at what point does Matt Rule have a potential first-round guy that is on his, recruiting class? I mean, yes, you have one in the recruiting class, Raiola, a potential first-round guy, but can you develop those guys? That's what he made his money on, both Baylor and Temple, was taking guys, the 3 stars, the unheralded guys, and turning him into a guy that was a day 2 draft pick, a day 1 draft pick in the NFL draft. And I think that's a question of health of the Nebraska football program. At what point do they get a guy that could be first or second round, and do they have any on the current roster?
I think that's the question for 2024. And they don't, Randy Gregory, when he arrived at Nebraska from junior college and obviously started his career at Purdue, like you could look at him and be like, he showed up and you're like, if he's as good as advertised, he's, first, second, third round pick. And I think he ended up going a little bit lower than that, if I remember. But this Nebraska roster, I don't think has those kind of guys where you're just like, he comes in, other than maybe you would expect, you mentioned Raiola, Elijah. That's correct. I mean, in terms of a 5-star quarterback, you've got a pretty high expectation. But other than that, like, they're going to have to make their second and third round picks. And, we'll see. I think they have a good potential. I think the trend line is up here, but you're still waiting for that kind of development and breakout season for some guys.
Is there anybody that jumps out right now? Because you're right. There isn't that can't miss. Like Gregory just had, he was just built like very few people are. His athleticism was off the charts for that size. Like a freak, right? Is that sort of what we're talking about? Is that Nebraska maybe lacks the freak? You know, like Sue is a freak of nature, strength-wise, endurance-wise. Nebraska kind of lacks that. Like a lot of good players, but maybe not that.
I think you've got freakish strength with the polar bear. I mean, I'm fired up to see what he can play at 285, 290. Say he stays at his wrestling rate, okay, and has that endurance, and has some help where he's not playing 50, 60 snaps at nose guard. That's tiring. I mean, I'm excited. I think, Vogue's your story, counterread.com with Brandon Vogel, is going to be about who's the guy, right? And that guy translates to a draft pick, just to reset it for our friends in the stream. I think Nebraska has some guys, and I think they've identified some talent. And the thing is, you're going to get that talent developed. You've gotten it developed under Rule. So even the guys they're recruiting now, we don't know. They could start churning out NFL guys, and your two candidates are Robinson and Polar Bear.
And Schmidt, you and I talked off the air after we had Brandon on Thursday about this topic, like who are some guys that could have that potential? Because I brought up, the guy who is the best player on the team at the end of spring football might not be the guy who's the best player on the team come mid-season next year. A couple guys that sprung to mind of being those potential breakout candidates. Deshaun Singleton was one that came up. He's got
he's money.
NFL
he's a
size
good player.
And athleticism on the back end. I think he's got potential there. You look at Fedoni or Carter Nelson offensively as being freaks on the offensive side of the football. Dowdell, we haven't seen him in a Husker uniform just yet, but he's a guy. We saw the high school film. His size to speed ratio is somewhat freakish. Can he turn it into being a Big Ten running back? That remains to be seen, but you have candidates on each side of the ball.
I would add Tommy Hill to that list as well.
Let me add one more. Jalen Lloyd.
Yeah. I mean, I think of that group, I would agree with you. I think Robinson and Hutmacher are probably at the top of your list. In particular, I think Nash has a chance to play himself way up draft boards this season. Deshaun Singleton, Tommy Hill, very similar, long corner. Going through some of that draft stuff, I had kind of forgotten that Stanley Jean-Baptiste out of nowhere. I think
second round, dude.
Second round, was he second round? I thought it was third.
He went to the Saints, I think.
Yeah, that was a guy who played like 14 games of cornerback in his career at that point.
Son, we know you have problems with catching the ball consistently, but you're 6'3" and your wingspan is insane, and you can run. Go change the Ohio State game with an interception.
Yeah.
No, Stanley was just a freak. I mean, it was impressive. I'm anxious to see, and this goes back to the Chasing 3 documentary guys. We talk about Polar Bear and how driven that dude is, and that's really cool to see what he's doing, to see it pay off. Because Polar Bear could have been, what could have been with those players where the Iowas, the Wisconsins, the Nebraskas are chasing to land him. You want to get a South Dakota kid. Frost and his staff put the kitchen sink into that recruitment, and it's working out. You've got a season left, but with Ty Robinson, I mean, he gets that he's had some splashes and some flashes. He wants to go wreck games now. And if you're patient, by year 5, year 6, year 4, that's when guys build up to being able to have that Sioux senior season. And I think the patience and the watering, the development's super key. It'd be nice to have a guy kill it in year 2. That ain't reality on the lines of scrimmage in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's really tough to do in a conference like the Big Ten. I mean, in terms of guys that could develop into those day 1, day 2 guys, I think Nebraska has one in Princewell as well.
Yeah.
You're in year 2, so we'll see. I mean, given how much he played as a true freshman, certainly an indicator of his ability and his physical readiness. That might be a pretty good jump candidate in year 2 as well.
Folks, before we get you out, how you feeling about Nebraska basketball? Let's go there for just a moment. A Thursday missed opportunity, as we talked earlier in the week. We know that the opportunity was there for Nebraska. I just didn't like some of their choices, and they didn't play with a lack of effort. They didn't give us a Maryland performance, but from just a basketball IQ standpoint, they just kind of settled for some 3-point garbage. And I know that's part of their offense, but they just didn't have it. They just reverted back to some old bad habits.
Yeah, I mean, they shot pretty well from 3 in that game. Like, I'd say the first 30 minutes, I thought it was a pretty encouraging result for Nebraska. They had a lead in the first half, lost it, but kind of hung around. I think I was most disappointed defensively. They just couldn't. Ohio State, kind of got that 6-7-ish point lead there, and Nebraska would trim it to 2, but when it came time to get a stop, they just never quite did it. Or when they did, it seemed like they pressed a little bit then on the offensive end with the chance to get even or take a lead. So a little bit just of an uneven performance, but it wasn't one that I left that discouraged about. So you got one more home game. I think that's the one with the team you already lost to kind of let's officially punch this ticket, even though it won't quite be official. I mean, Nebraska at this point is in. That said, I wouldn't want to end on a 3-game losing streak and test the numbers and the models with where they have Nebraska at this point.
It's just amazing that it feels like every single time this team has a chance to put the Husker PTSD to bed, they allow it to come right back to the forefront. Like, every single time you have that, like, man, if they get this win, it's the proof that this team
things will be okay.
Things will be okay. As soon as that game rolls around, Nebraska finds a way to lose it, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I think that's kind of their true state. Like, that's the difference between being pretty good and really good. And Nebraska's pretty good. And I think we'll see. We'll see. Because every game feels a little bit like, are you going to get the A game? Are you going to get the B game, the C game, or something even worse? Good teams, really good teams, you have a little bit more sense of what you're going to get.
Vogues, let's talk Big Ten expansion. I assume the league will get to 20 or 24 here by the time this 14 team is settled, and maybe that 14 turns into 16. Who knows? But the NFL model is the blueprint they seem to be following with 4 divisions in the Big Ten. You've got your conference semis for the right to go on to the Super Bowl, your AFC, NFC between 2 of your divisions. Who do you add? And I know you're the guy that fights for the G5 schools. You're also very practical, knowing that things are headed this way. So give me some additions you'd like or fits you think could be a reality. And you can go G5, you can go Big 12, you can even go ACC. I don't think the Big Ten and the SEC will allow one another to try and have a poaching contest for one true conference power. I think they'll work together. A&M's kind of the wild card based on the BS smoke earlier this week about them wanting out.
So that's what the Big Ten SEC partnership is about. They're just going to trade schools. They're like, we'll give you a Texas A&M and a Missouri.
They're the neighborhood swingers in college football.
Oh. I mean, if you're like, I know that Texas A&M really hates Texas, but can you really flee the Longhorns again and have any pride left? Like, seriously. I know you enjoyed your time. You're like, hey, look at us. We made it to the SEC. Enjoy your Big 12, Texas. And, well, the SEC was like, yeah, they're still Texas. So we'll take that. And
We just went to the football playoff, and now we're coming to your neighborhood.
Yep. Sorry if that sucks for you, but it is what it is. I definitely wouldn't jump to the Big Ten. I mean, I had this penciled out a couple of weeks ago, and now I've forgotten. Like, obviously, you take Notre Dame if you can get them, which good luck with that, I guess. Like, if Notre Dame hasn't jumped at this point, like, they're basically going to have to be forced to before they do it voluntarily, and I don't know what that takes. Does in our new
It's got to be playoff path, doesn't it?
Yeah, NFL light future, like does academic prestige still matter to the Big Ten? Like
AAU will.
Does so I mean, I think the Big Ten, and I think it actually would be an interesting fit. Like, I think the Big Ten would love to have Virginia. We know, like, back when Rutgers, Maryland happened, there was some interest in Georgia Tech. I mean, I don't know if there's Big 12 teams that make a ton of sense other than.
I love Colorado and Kansas.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, eventually at this point, like, I've given up hope that this isn't coming. So now I think I'm just like, can we just get big enough to the point where effectively the Big Ten has to have a Big 8 division? Like,
that's what I'm thinking.
Let's just do that. So I don't know. This 14-team playoff thing, like, the initial report came from ESPN. Heather Dinich and Pete Thamel are both very good, well-sourced reporters. That said, ESPN has the biggest stake in this future playoff. They've already agreed to televise it through 2026 for almost $8 billion. So the news that they're considering this, it was a test balloon. It was like, let's get this out and we'll see how people react to it. Probably going to do it anyway, but let's at least see how people feel about this. And I don't feel great about it, but I don't matter.
Well, you always matter, folks. But no, if you're going to have this Big Ten Midwest division, give me Iowa, give me Kansas, give me Colorado. Help me keep counting, fellas, here. Do you want Wisconsin? Do you want Minnesota?
Yeah.
In the division?
Yeah. Northwestern. You go 6 for you have your 24-team league. That'd be
4
fun.
divisions.
And if you're going and then you're going to be able to play your West Coast schools. You'll still get a game with Oregon. You'll still get Penn State. You'll still get Ohio State.
Here's the question. I think, honestly, it makes more sense both geographically, and Nebraska is not really a traditional rivalry with anybody that you laid out aside from Iowa to put Nebraska in a potential West Coast division. I think it might make a little bit more sense.
But, put them in the West Coast, but give me, if you get Notre Dame and give me Kansas, give me Colorado. I mean, that'd be kick-ass every year.
USC, UCLA, Nebraska, Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame makes sense as a division in my book.
Whoa. That came out of nowhere, kind of, Elijah. What are you talking about? Like, we're over here talking about Kansas and Wisconsin and Minnesota, and then you go UCLA, USC.
As it currently stands.
That is
and Gary joins all of a sudden.
Gary's reaching for the wild. He's reaching for the wild turkey already.
I mean, compared to everybody else in the Big Ten.
Hold on, real quick. For folks that can't see it right now, that on the stream, Gary joins, and within the first second or two, just shaking his head right away at Elijah's suggestion.
I would just like to say,
that should tell you something.
Compared to everybody else in the Big Ten, Nebraska has more history with schools like USC, UCLA, Washington. Maybe not Oregon, but you can throw Oregon in there as well. I think that in terms of the helmet matchups you'd get, throw Nebraska in a West Coast division, the travel would suck, and I'm not sure Husker fans would love it, but it's about TV ratings at the end of the day. And I think Nebraska makes sense from that perspective. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just the guy shouting at the clouds here, but I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, we don't coast, right? That's.
I promise there's no whiskey in my coffee this morning. I promise.
Yeah. Huh. Fair enough. So divisions wise, Gary, that's what we're talking about. Is the super leagues get together. Now we break into divisions. Who's in Nebraska's division? And are we going 3 8-teamers or are we going 4 6-teamers?
4 6-teamers.
I think you got to go 4 6-teamers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when the SEC and the Big Ten are together and they've merged because it's all about generating revenue for their schools, I think you have to go 4 6-team divisions. I think that'd be the way to go.
I think you go 3 8-teamers just to make it really weird when it comes like championship time. And people are like, well, which one? Which division? I think it'll be a lot of fun. Just a thought.
A 3-team Big Ten playoff.
Exactly. Just why not?
Gary, you're muted.
We lost Gary.
We all love the game of college football, but god dang, we do a terrible job in the offseason with college football.
Yeah? How so? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, is this fun?
Talking about the divisions?
Expansion. We like 12. Now, you know this, Mark, because you've been told this before in your business, in your personal life. Bigger is not always better. Okay? So sometimes when you get to 12, why do you got to expand to 14? I mean, I know where we're going here. Yeah. The SEC and the Big Ten, again, they want to generate as much revenue for their schools as possible, and they're going to find every avenue to do that. I mean, you can't blame them because that's, at the end of the day, that's what they're in for. But there's some point where, and Brandon and I have talked about this on my show, there's some point where the college football fan says enough is enough. Even if we get these great matchups and the 2 best leagues that have the teams that have the most money, at some point we say enough is enough, and then the bottom falls out. But as long as the TV companies are on board with it and they're like, oh yeah, Big Ten, SEC, I want more and more, the rest of college football is screwed, in my opinion.
At some point you jump the shark. At some point you screw it up, you keep tweaking. You need to let it rest and just let it play out. Vogues, you're awesome for giving us some overtime. What's coming up with Counter Reed? I love your story on who's the guy when it comes to Nebraska football in reference to the next draft pick. Well played. Tell folks how to subscribe and what you do with Counter Reed.
Yeah, you can find us at counterread.com and sign up there. There's a free subscription option or a paid subscription option. Paid subscribers get two exclusive newsletters a week. That's for myself and Aaron Sorensen. And after asking the question, and thank you guys for jumping in discussion of who's the guy, probably got to answer that next week. So do that, and I think we'll probably dip back in with basketball a little bit later in the week.
No, that'll be fun. Folks, have a good weekend. All right, bud?
All right. Thanks, guys.
There he is. All right. Brandon Vogel with his Counter Read. Sharpie, it was awesome to see you last Sunday, man, in front of Nebraska as they got rolling and put another, kind of a ho-hum butt kicking together. And then you and I were both just kind of looking at each other going, Ohio State isn't going to be a lot of fun this week. And it ended up not being. But things still look pretty bright for Husker basketball.
Yeah, you know what? There's actually, I think Lenardi moved Nebraska up.
Yeah, to an 8 seed.
Yeah, as long as if Nebraska is an 8 and 9, they're not coming to Omaha. They'd have to be a 7. They have to be in that 7-10 game. You know what? Thursday night didn't surprise me. Ohio State is playing with a sense of desperation. Yep. Nebraska was due for one of those games where everything didn't come together in this 4-game stretch in which they had won. You're just hoping that you could find a way at the end to win. And you battled some things that were out of your control, but it's not like it dinged them. I think Ohio State's, they've got a new life to them, and all of a sudden they're thinking, man, how can we get ourselves into the conversation? We got to beat Nebraska. And kudos to them. They played really well. It wasn't something that we went, Nebraska's in trouble, because tomorrow it'll be 70 degrees. The building will be packed. It'll be senior day. Is Nebraska really losing in the last home game for Tominaga?
I don't think so. Worst fear in case scenario for maybe many scarred Nebraska basketball fans. Yeah, they're sweating a little bit just because this team's.
Or that's what you do as a Nebraska basketball fan.
Yeah, the team terrorizes you, unfortunately. But no, people are going to be throwing beers in the rail yard. And then they're going to get the PBA, and it's going to be ruckus. It'll be good. And you owe Rutgers, quite honestly. You should have pounded them the first time. Went to overtime.
Yeah, I think here's the thing, though, about Nebraska, and I've said for a while, they're in the tournament. They can only play themselves out. I don't think the Big Ten tournament and what Nebraska does has much bearing on their seed in the NCAA tournament 2 weeks from tomorrow. So they have 2 games to take care of business and just leave that kind of lasting impression. Now, nobody wants Nebraska to go one and done in Minneapolis, But we have seen the committee, unless you are one of those teams that makes a run and like a Penn State, they really don't put a lot of stock into your conference tournament. So you have two opportunities to say, hey, this is who we are. And I think Nebraska's resume is solid enough that they feel like an 8 or 9 seed right now.
Well, without going conspiracy theory with what happened on Thursday night, a team that could have a lot of implications in the Big Ten tournament could be Ohio State, right, with how hot they've been at the end of the year?
Yeah, and they would be one of those teams that the committee looks at and goes, okay, but I think Ohio State would have to be a team that would have to win the tournament to get in. But, Ohio State they've got good talent. Their talent has matched, the level of their play and their talent have matched. And whatever the disconnect was between Holtman and his roster, Gene Smith said, man, we got to make a hard decision. And it looks like Jake Diebler as the interim, they're playing a lot more guys off the bench. They have a lot more energy, and they're winning. I mean, when you're not winning and you're at a place like Ohio State that's been used to winning, man, that's tough to go to work every day. And so they got the spark that they wanted. I'll be curious to see how they do here to finish up. But you know what? They played well the other night. I mean, it's not like Nebraska played poorly. There were stretches where they just disappeared. That was just a game of a team in late February with desperation. And, you weren't able to match, certain elements of that. It's kind of like what Minnesota said about when they got beat by Nebraska in that game that Schmidt just referenced last weekend.
Yeah, and well, let's look at tomorrow too with Rutgers, where if you look at the Ohio State game, you had Lawrence that shot well, nobody else did. I mean, the chances of, because you basically have 5 guys, 6 guys on this roster that you could say are scoring types, and the chances of all of them having a tough shooting night, like even Gary going 3 of 12, that's unlikely. That's unlikely. That alone, if you get just 2 of your guys that are hitting like they should, usually Nebraska wins. And 17-1 at home. I mean, come on, Nebraska is one of the best home teams in America. Tomorrow should work out pretty well.
Yeah, and I think here's the one thing I like, Fred, and I've said this for a long time, guys. Fred is really connected with this team, and I think Fred is doing everything possible to push this team over the finish line and get them in the NCAA tournament. And then once you get there, you have no idea what's going to happen because it's all about matchups. But he was spot on. They didn't have the same kind of passion defensively that they've had during this 4-game winning streak, when really it's been their defense that has carried them and allowed them to be a team of 5-6 guys contributing on offense. So I think he'll get the intended result of what he said after the game. I mean, it was no surprise to any of us that Nebraska just didn't have the same edge they had defensively. So I think they're going to be fine tomorrow. It'll be one of those games where Rutgers will come in here and try and beat you up. And Nebraska has been able to respond better this year, don't you think, guys, to teams that try that against them than in the past?
I do. They got sick of it, and they got challenged. And it goes back to their practice prep where Fred kind of beat the hell out of them after he called him soft. He called him soft a couple of instances, and they responded the right way. They've not been uber consistent, but they have been more willing to do the little things and be a little more grittier in the paint. And they've had to, because they have the talent. I mean, they're fun. They've got a cast of characters. And this is the team you'll remember, hopefully positively, if you're a Nebraska basketball fan. But they've got all sorts of characters here that someone steps up every ball game. You've got your old favorites. So I don't know. Sharpie, you've covered NCAA tournament games when they've come to Omaha, and who's the draw this year? Is it going to be Kansas? Does Ames come west? I mean, Iowa State's played great basketball. If you're drafting who gets to come to Omaha here, who do you think would just absolutely eat, drink, and be merry for the weekend?
I think it's death taxes, and when Omaha is hosting the first and second round, KU is coming here.
Okay, period. Okay.
Yeah, and even losing like they did against BYU, and they got Baylor today. I think Kansas metrics, and I know you guys have all bashed your head about trying to figure out the metrics of college basketball seeding. The metrics are still good. KU is probably still going to be here. I will tell you, Iowa State's got a great shot to be here. And then the other thing, watch today. So Marquette may have a chance to be here as well if they beat Creighton and they stay ahead of Creighton. Those would be 3 teams I'd look for. But KU and Iowa State more than likely are going to be in Omaha, and it'll be crazy. That's why if Nebraska stays in the 8-9 game, they're not coming to Omaha because we won't have a number 1 seed here. But if they fall to that 10 seed, there's still the possibility they could be opposite of a KU playing in Omaha.
Oh, geez. And
Yeah,
the NCAA
that'd be a party.
They do consider sort of like regional location more now than they used to. They used to is just total scattershot, didn't matter at all.
Yeah.
But in this case, if Nebraska is in that 7 or that 10, they would really consider it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and Nebraska can play in Omaha. It's just it's mixed when you talk to people of, man, would you want Nebraska playing that close to home? It'd be a CF. It'd be a difficult ticket to get, especially with Iowa State and KU fans here. Or would you like Nebraska to get away and go somewhere and play a neutral site game? But there is precedence. Like last year, Birmingham had a regional, and Auburn got sent there, and Auburn ended up playing Iowa. So it felt like a Auburn home game, and Iowa was very aware of that.
That made me sad.
Hey, I tell you, if Nebraska somehow ended up in Omaha, it'd be a circus here. It'd be an absolute circus of fans that would be here, and then Nebraska trying to get their first NCAA tournament win, and they would do it on Creighton's home court.
Well, dare I say, you look at it as well. As it stands, we laid out the ESPN bracketology with Lenardi. He's got Nebraska currently playing in Memphis against Mississippi State in the first round. Shout out to my buddy Will. He's out in Memphis. He thinks that's great.
That's a freaking road game. I mean, obviously it's a road game.
But Memphis is drivable.
Memphis is super drivable for those in Starkville.
Yeah.
Memphis isn't actually a bad. You got to drive through the Ozarks. You got to go through this scary place, Ravenden, I think it's Missouri. It could be Arkansas. It's right on the border. One of the scariest places I've ever been through. It's like this sleepy town that
you see Ned Beatty or something. I mean,
no. It feels like a horror story because what they have in the middle of their town is this giant statue of a raven, and it's the creepiest statue you've ever seen. Like, it's got red eyes. I can pull up a picture. You have to drive through it on your way to Memphis, and don't recommend it. There's a big sign when you enter town that like all drug smugglers will be prosecuted under the highest offense of the law. Like, it is very much like one of those towns that you think there's a horror story set in. But anyway, I digress. You compare
Is Memphis barbecue overrated?
I mean,
it's okay. You know what? I've been to Memphis a couple of times. Nice city. The music scene is really good. Beale Street is nice. Mm-hmm. They have where the FedEx Forum is, where the Grizzlies play and Memphis Tigers play, is right across the street, essentially from the minor league baseball stadium. Nice little area. The Liberty Bowl they've done a lot with. It's okay. I mean, it's I wouldn't put it at the top of my list of regional barbecue.
Okay.
But you can go to the hotel, the hotel right there downtown in Memphis, and they
Peabody.
The Peabody, and they parade the ducks through like at 4 p.m.
What happens there? I'm trying to.
So they have these famous ducks at this hotel that swim in the little pool.
Yeah.
And so they have a parade of the ducks like in the afternoon.
Okay.
So for everybody that wants to go to Memphis to watch Nebraska play, that's one thing to put on your list.
You can see the ducks. You can see the raven in Ravenden. It is Arkansas. It is in Arkansas. It is a creepy, creepy statue.
All that's missing is the stars and bars behind that. I mean, what a shot.
Wait, back to my point, though. I didn't finish my point. You look at the Memphis draw where it's first round Mississippi State and then potential second round matchup with Houston, which would be fun but a tough draw. You compare that to Omaha, where if you're the 10 seed, you take on, as it stands right now, Utah State, followed up with, if you can win that one, a likely second round matchup against Iowa State. Everything about Omaha seems to be more appealing than going to Memphis. From the first round matchup to the location to the second round matchup, everything about Omaha, you go, that looks like a much better situation for Nebraska.
Yeah, I'm gonna be Debbie Downer here. I'm still on March 2nd going to be the person that it's just something that Nebraska's in the NCAA tournament in a year in which they were preseason 12th. Yeah. And then wherever they go, that's perfectly fine. And then after that, you're kind of playing with house money of never won a game before. That'll be a storyline. I think the national people will love Tominaga and that storyline. Really good story in the Washington Post yesterday. Once you're in, and once 2 weeks from tomorrow they announce your name, now it's house money for Nebraska. It's like, you know what? We haven't won a game, but we've had this kind of year. Let's keep it rolling and see what happens. I'd love to have him in Omaha, the convenience, but I also know what a CF it would be in Omaha.
Well, Walter's been tossed out of 4 bars on Beale Street. And our dear friend NASCAR Eric says those are rookie numbers. Eric Fear. That's pretty funny. Sharpie, will wind it down and want to get your take on Husker baseball. I know they got the middle finger from Mother Nature, but pretty nice work at least to come back and get it handled Thursday. That 4-run ninth for Nebraska baseball, and then to hold it down and win one of the series. We'll see if they get to go today. I know there's weather still in the area. Yesterday's game was canceled in this series, but College of Charleston, no joke, and good for Nebraska.
Yeah, you know what? They played a good schedule. I tell you, it was impressive what they did in Phoenix last week, especially on that Sunday getaway day where they were up 8-1, and then the next thing you know, it's 8-8, and Grand Canyon, which loved to run their mouth the entire series, guy gets tossed for flipping his bat, and they find a way then to score 2 runs to win. They're finding ways to win. They're an interesting team. Like Augie Garrido would be a big fan of Nebraska baseball. They like to run the bases well. They like to bunt. They play station to station. And the other thing, man, Rob Childress is worth every cent. Now they're still trying to figure some things out in the bullpen, but guys that struggled don't usually stack bad performances like Worthley, Timmerman. They bounce back the next outing. And then the biggest project is Drew Christo. I think by the time Nebraska gets to Big Ten play, Drew Christo will have a spot in the weekend rotation, and that has Rob Childress written all over it.
That's impressive.
And what's interesting about some of his numbers, by the way, Christo, the fact that he has not it wasn't a dominant strikeout performance, and that's the guy that came to Nebraska, was just a power pitcher, double-digit strikeout per game kind of guy. He went 6 2/3, only struck out 2, and was still pretty effective.
Yep.
So that does kind of show, I think, to your point, Gary, like he's starting to understand the finer points of pitching and make it a little bit simpler, learn about location a little bit more.
No, you make
impressive.
Mark, you make a great point.
And I'm not sure he was a guy you were counting on.
I think they were counting on him because if you go back to the first time they met with the media, they rolled Drew out there, and he's front and center.
That's true.
You're thinking, okay, here's the Friday night guy.
Right.
And then this is the accountability that if you're pitching for Rob Childress, you got to throw strikes. Okay, if you're not throwing strikes and you're walking guys and you're messing around on the mound, you're not for him. So they took him out of the opening rotation on the opening weekend because he had struggled in a couple of weeks leading up to their opener. And they said, you know what, we'll let you get right out of the bullpen. Well, he did what was asked of him. And now he's gotten back-to-back starts. And one thing you brought up that I think is spot on, Mark, is he's understanding how to pitch. He had a big boy arm at Elkhorn. Okay, he could just blow it by everybody. And then he would drop a 12-6 curveball on you. And guys in Class B in Nebraska were like, whoa. Well, he tried the same thing when he got to Nebraska, and he's had to learn how to pitch. And I think that's where Rob has come into play here is, okay, we're going to get confidence back in 3 pitches for you, and we're going to get most confidence in your fastball, but we're going to teach you how to pitch backwards, how to approach hitters, how to understand an entire count, what you're supposed to do, how to work with your catcher, how to understand the scouting reports. And I think they've moved him along to the point where you can rely on him now. And that's really a testament to Drew, but also kind of as Rob approaches his pitchers, he's competitive, man, and he's got standards. And if you don't live up to those standards, you're not going to stay in a game and you're not going to stay in a rotation. So look at guys as the season goes along that make that jump that you go, boy, where did he come from?
Yeah.
And also, guys, and I want another thing, like I was just alluding to, there aren't guys that are stacking bad performances. You'll have a bad outing, you'll give up you'll get dinged a little bit, but it seems like the next time you go out there, and it's not like they put you on a milk carton, they put you right back out there, and you perform well, like a Kyle Perry last weekend.
Well, and Gary, I think what's interesting too is when we say, hey, Rob Childress wants you to throw strikes, like on its surface, to maybe somebody that doesn't follow baseball a lot, you're like, well, doesn't every pitching coach want them to throw strikes, right? But can we maybe get into how it's different, just in terms of, it just feels like Childress wants them to be super aggressive, almost risky, where it's just like, no. We are pumping strikes. Yes, that means you might get teed off on, right? Yeah. But it's like his overall philosophy is like, walks will kill you, things like that will just absolutely kill you. You challenge the hitters every time. We're not pitching around anybody.
Yep. No, that's been his philosophy from the time I met him in 1998. Is you're going to throw strikes and you are going to get hit. Not everybody has stuff that you're going to miss a lot of bats, but we would like you to miss bats. But if you're going to make contact, understand you got 7 guys behind you that can help you. Okay, you don't have to do all the work. And so it's kind of like the pitching 101 that Rob teaches these guys. And some guys needed that. Some guys are a little bit further along. But I also think he likes to have depth, whether it be rotation or in the bullpen. And he's not afraid to use and mix and match guys. And I think that'll bode well as you get into the heart of the season on Big Ten weekends, but also the area where Nebraska struggled last year, and that was on the midweek. You know, the midweek essentially kept them out of the NCAA tournament among a couple of other things. So I think Crystal will find his way into the rotation on the Big Ten weekend, and maybe you let a guy like Caleb Clark go and be your Tuesday night guy, where he can settle in there and get some confidence. And if you need him back on the weekend, you can use him later in the season.
Sharpie, what's the weekend look like for you before we say goodbye?
Lots of tanning. I'll probably be shirtless at some point today and tomorrow. I might be.
You are going to soak up the 75 degree day.
Might be helicoptering at Pinnacle Bank Arena.
Really?
Pause.
Yeah.
Pause.
Yeah.
What?
No. Hey,
with your shirt, right?
Yes. That
was the confusion.
Yeah. All about basketball, man. This is great. Last year Nebraska was kind of making that run, but they were 500 and they really were in no brackets. This is fun. Embrace this. This is awesome. Tomorrow's the last home game. It's the last time for Tominaga, which, it seems like his career just flew by.
Yeah, it did.
The parents will be in town. So lots of basketball this weekend. And, you sit back and you think, all right, Nebraska 2 weeks from tomorrow is going to get announced in the NCAA tournament. Since Danny Nee got fired, they've only been in the tournament one time. And this year, of all years, where they were preseason 12th, and you were like, oh, no Greasel, no Walker. Here comes Mass, here comes Williams. Who are these guys? What's going to happen? Man, kudos to Fred Hoiberg, who is the coach of the year in the Big Ten, that he has pushed this team towards 2 weeks from now getting what everybody wants, and that's a trip to the NCAA tournament. So I hope tomorrow it'll be packed in there. It'll be a lot of fun. It's a great home court advantage, but to finish, 18-1 at home?
That's impressive.
Dang.
Well, Gary, without asking you the question directly, is it okay to start talking about what a successful postseason looks like, or is that a conversation for next week once you look at what happens against Rutgers?
You know what? I think that's fair because I got into this debate midweek. If the season ended today and they said, you know what, CBS ran out of money, they can't pay anybody, so we're not going to do March Madness. Is this a successful season for Nebraska?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They've drilled some big dogs. I mean, and they weren't fluke wins. They had a massive comeback, and then they beat the number one seed by 16. And they've drilled a lot of teams. They've gone from down 3 or 5 points to flip and to switch guys and win by 10, 12, 15 points against some nice opponents. And they've gotten in their own way. I mean, they've contributed to their road loss. It's not like they've gotten housed by everybody on the road. They've screwed up their road opportunity. They could have 3 or 4 more road wins.
I'll keep it very simple here. The discussion, was it successful? The whole point of watching sports is having fun.
Yeah.
To boil it down simply, did you have fun watching this Husker basketball team? Did you have fun storming the court twice at Pinnacle Bank Arena this year, which not many teams get to do ever, have 2 court stormings in one season? Did you have fun? I think Husker Nation will almost universally say, yes, I had fun watching this team. It wasn't always the best results, but week in, week out, they kept me glued to my television, and I had fun watching it. And that's about the only barometer for success that you need with this season based on how the past 4 have gone.
Yeah, and I think hopefully this season has done one other thing. And it's tough being a Nebraska basketball fan, man. They take you through the roller coaster. You don't really get your return on investment very many times. You can remember the exact moments when you had the most fun time, where there'd be no sit Saturday or some of the games this year. Hopefully this year with Nebraska basketball, we have eliminated the mentality of football and scheduling, that every single game is just like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. That's what I'm cautioning against about Ohio State on Thursday night. They got beat, okay? It didn't knock them out of the tournament. They got beat by a team that was playing with desperation, and Nebraska did a couple of things that, they weren't able to win the game. But I have no fear that that's going to linger into Sunday. So hopefully people have looked at this season as a basketball season, that it's a marathon and not in football where it's essentially a sprint. But you're right, Elijah. It's been fun this year. I mean, there's going to be a lot of memories out of this, and you hope it just keeps rolling. And when you get to the NCAA tournament, you look at that matchup and you go, man, could this be the year with how this team is set up where they don't need one guy to be a star every single night? Is this the year they break through and get off that list of teams that have never won an NCAA tournament game?
Please. The only Power 5 that has not. The only. Mm-hmm. We shall
get on that bandwagon, national media, just like you did with Northwestern a few years back.
Hey, they'll be a popular team. You got Fred as their coach, and Nebraska not winning a game will be a storyline, but also Tominaga. I don't know. I'm not all into the committee believes in storylines. Sometimes they do in matchups, but like Nebraska will be a good national story for people to cover. To like, oh my gosh, here comes Nebraska basketball. Guys, they were 12th in the preseason. 2 years ago was about as rock bottom as it could be. And you're like, well, Hoiberg's not going to last. He has a meeting with his AD, has a plan that he presents, and 2 years later, he's knocking on the door going to the NCAA tournament. It's a hell of a story, and kudos to Fred for doing that. And for Trev to have some patience and to sit down and go, okay, let's look at what we're doing wrong. And those two got on the same page. And it's going to come to fruition, I think, 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Pretty awesome. Sharpie, have yourself a weekend, brother. We'll hope to bump into you tomorrow.
Guys, be good. Always great to listen to you and enjoy the week. 2 weeks from tomorrow.
All right. We'll be at Sharpie's with wings and beer. It'll be good.
2 weeks from tomorrow, we'll be sending you the Hail Varsity Radio Bracket Challenge. I'm going to start promoting that now. It's going to be out there for the Hail Varsity Radio fans, for Sharpie. We're going to have that created. And for everyone who loves Hail Varsity Radio or is involved with Hail Varsity Radio, we'll have a chance to compete in a bracket challenge, playing for pride. Maybe a Hail Varsity Radio T-shirt. More information on that.
I think we throw in the mug. Show them the mug. I think the mug needs to be up there.
Look at these fabulous prizes.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's good.
Like
It's a Texas Longhorn logo upside down, folks.
It's been used as a spitter before.
Yeah, good.
It's a game-used mug.
I have also been pushing for – we've been talking about the Hail Varsity Radio mug for a while, pushing for that to become available here at some point.
I don't know. I have the beer glass. I don't have the mug.
Well, I'm gonna make some things. I'm a guy that can make things happen, Schmidt. I'm gonna try to make this happen. I'm gonna try to make some T-shirts happen. So be on the lookout for that.
You are thrift stored it today, aren't you?
I was actually gonna go to Kohl's probably, but
no. Have fun with that.
I heard they're having a sale, by the way.
They always are. They always are.
Hey, make sure
Elijah walks in. I've got my special coin. I'm gonna start scratching.
Hey. Make sure you get that Kohl's Cash there, Elijah.
Oh,
what's the exchange rate with Kohl's Cash and Fleck coins? Does anyone know? I got plenty of Fleck coins. I'm not sure I have any Kohl's Cash. I need to hit the exchange counter.
My God.
Wow. Well, on that note, everyone behave and be safe. You need bail money, give us a shout. Take care.
All right.
Hey, enjoy if you're watching state basketball today. The finish of a hell of a 4-year career for Britt Prince before she moves off to Nebraska.
Yeah. Yep.
No, Britt's incredible. We got a chance to see her take over in that game against Beatrice yesterday. Triple-double, hit every big shot, got her teammates involved. Beatrice played well. I was super impressed by Beatrice. But no, Britt, and then we did the Kennedy Williams game last night with Southwest.
Yeah, she's gonna be good.
She's awesome. No, both of them. That's big. So,
Yep.
Sharpie, be good. Kraynak, love
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Elijah,
Thanks,
take care, and we'll be back
All right,
at you on Monday.